It's time for the Lisa Benson Show, your home for national security news and commentary. And now, your host, Lisa Benson.
Welcome, America, and thank you for joining us today. This is your host, Lisa Benson, and I wish those of you listening today celebrating Easter a very, very happy holiday. Happy Easter. Having hope and faith will sustain us through these difficult times. And hello to those listening from Israel tonight and the Europeans who I know are listening as well. Thank you for staying up late with us. Thank you to Bill Wolf, who gave a shout out to this show a little while ago. And I want to remind everyone that every Sunday afternoon here at KKNT 960 The Patriot, there's 2 hours of great programming on national security, foreign policy, and pro-Israel matters. So tell your friends about us and please continue to tune in. Jihad doesn't stop for holidays. In fact, jihadists prey upon our values and our religious freedom. Islamists don't care that we just want to live, to love, to laugh with our friends and families. What they want is to be supremacists, to have the world live a repressive existence under their doctrine. We mourned yet another tragic event this week. The attack on Brussels was not the first attack on civilians in Belgium. In May of 2014, a lone jihadist that killed innocent people at the Brussels Jewish Museum struck me in my mind as soon as I heard this terrorist plot unfolding, which was, by the way, a large terrorist cell plot. Now, I don't care what they're saying in Belgium. This is the mother of cells, and it is not going to go away just by the Belgian authorities putting out a press release. Make no mistake, there's ISIS, but there's also Al-Qaeda growing all over the globe. Bomb makers of Al-Qaeda and the ISIS fighters are cousins and in a race to take over Europe, Asia, Africa, and the United States. And today we learned in horror the attack of women and children celebrating Easter at a park in Pakistan. Latest reports, the latest that I saw, 60 or so dead, 200 injured. It doesn't stop, and it won't stop until we take control. And I'm going to speak about that today. Today's broadcast is entitled, "You Are in a Long War Now. Act Like It." And that was penned by Richard Cutting, who is our co-host today. And that article went viral this week. So if you want to have a copy of that, it'll be on my website, hopefully by the end of tonight. Dr. Zudi Jasser is with us today, and so is Nidra Pollard, live from Paris, to give us an update on European crisis. Let's begin. Co-hosting with me today is Richard Cutting, writer, producer, director, actor, and national security observer and commentator, and a member of our board of advisors. Welcome back, Richard.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me on today.
And co-piling with me today, and Jerry's got the day off. I know he's listening in, and I thank you both always for having my back and appreciate it. I'd like to get right to it here. By the way, my website is lisabensonradioshow.com. That will tell you more about who I am, what this show's about, and the National Security Task Force of America. Let's bring Dr. Jasser on. Zudi, thank you for coming back.
Oh, it's great to be with you again, Lisa. Thank you.
You know, it's been a hard week, Zudi. A very, very hard week. And I always appreciate your insight, and I know you've been very busy, so I appreciate you giving up some of your day with us. Long War, you know, we did have this title of this article, and it did go viral. I don't know if it sort of just hit everybody. You know, we're really in this war, but what does this mean? Because we're in a long war, but the long war didn't just start. This long war has been going on for a while. So my first question to you is, as a Muslim, Zudi, explain to us what it is, what we're looking at. What is this long war?
Well, I think this is even a longer war than the Cold War was, because this is the coming to fruition of a cancer that we sort of put on pause while we were fighting the Soviets. We created these allies through the Middle East that were dictators, and we sort of picked the lesser of two evils. And now the internal cauldrons of radical Islam that our Saudi allies, our Pakistani allies, our Egyptian allies allowed to fester within their own governments, within their own people, now is coming to roost as these radical Islamist groups set hold and now have territory, as we see with ISIS. and they divide the world into Dar al-Islam, the land of Islam, and the land of war. And anything outside Muslim-majority countries is the land of war. So they will continue, even though they're fighting very kinetic wars inside Syria, inside Iraq. They will continue to also fight asynchronous wars outside the land of Islam, because they want to take the main threat to them is not the dictators in the Middle East. Those dictators have no moral authority. They are evil, and just as sort of the other side of the evil coin of radical Islam. But the main threat to them is the West: freedom, liberty, capitalism, the ideas that Muslims would rather have than the theocracy that they're seeing. So this long war now is them trying to break our will as they commit acts of terror from America to Brussels to Paris and on, to them trying to set foot and a establishment, if you will, in Syria and Iraq and spread throughout the Middle East.
Zudi, I'm reading, I was watching the TV. I was watching CNN International as this started to break in the Brussels airport. And then, of course, for all these nights, many of us have stayed up all night to see what's happening. But what was resonating with me this morning on talk shows and news outlets was they keep saying over and over again, the brothers. They talked about the brothers, and they talked about the community of Molenbeek, and they talked about it as being disenfranchised, 40% youth unemployment, and this is why they are jihadists. So I have a two-part question to you. Is this a reasonable assessment to talk about? I mean, there's no assimilation. They hang in this community. It's a no-go zone, and should we be apologizing for 40% unemployment? Therefore, they become Islamists, and therefore they start blowing us up. Can you explain to us why this makes no sense to me? I don't know if it makes sense to you.
Oh, no. I mean, the concept of disenfranchisement implies that the primary problem came from the West. The primary problem came from immigrants who bring with them a tribalism, a sense of supremacy of their societal culture and theology being dominant to the West. The difference, though, we have to realize this is not all Muslims, obviously. Families like mine came to the West seeking freedom, seeking religious liberty, and the ability to make our own interpretations of Islam different from the mafia, the Islamist mafia that's running our societies. But many of them came just for economic reasons, and those who continue to be Islamists will live tribally, and this is why you see so many brothers involved in communities. I mean, what was so unique and frightening about this cell, it's one of the first cells that we know of that committed 2 acts of terror 4 months apart, and we weren't able to break it apart. Why? Because they were being shielded only a few blocks away from the home that the security services in the entire EU knew they came from. So when a community shields them, you knew many of them knew they were there, but they shielded them because they don't perceive themselves as being Belgium. And look, many of the arrests in that area came from a group called Sharia for Belgium. So as long as you don't counter and expose groups like Sharia for Belgium and start creating reform and targeting those ideas, they're going to fester as an insurgency within Brussels, within Paris, and all over the West.
I think you might have seen this report as well, Zudi. It was an Interpol report that said that there is as many as 500,000 Islamic State, which we refer to as ISIS, jihadi supporters in Europe. Does that number seem high, or do you see that as being accurate or somewhat accurate, or do you feel surprised by it?
Well, boy, that's an interesting number. I know there's thousands, and we know, like, even from Molenbeek, there were a few hundred, and from Belgium, there were 600 that went to Syria. So you do the math, it's definitely in the tens of thousands that want to become jihadis. Hundreds of thousands might be sympathetic Muslims that believe that the cause of ISIS is, they may not like their means and reject the terrorism, but yet they're in the stands cheering on the team, if you will. So yes, this is what we're missing in the radicalization. Recently we had this debate about whether we should have police monitoring, and it's absurd that we can't monitor Salafi jihadi ideologues like the San Bernardino terrorists And we waited until the last few days before they were arming themselves, and we missed that. And if we wait only till when they're getting arms and we miss the Al-Huda school of Pakistani militancy that these two were following, that we reject, that is politically incorrect to follow those ideologies. And the mosque, for example, that was fundamentalist, that is surrender. That is just, we can't win that war.
Zuhdi, you are the president of the American Islamic Forum on Democracy. You are a leader in the Muslim Reform Movement. And many of you within the Muslim Reform Movement have been critical to my understanding of Salafi Islam, of Wahhabi Islam. But we thank you and Raheel Raza for teaching me about Deobandi Pakistaniism, which I have been seeing all over this country as I have been traveling, speaking throughout the East Coast. And I know that would not surprise you. So I thank you for your courageous work in both areas of your nonprofit and the the Muslim Reform Movement. Mike, I also heard Dr. Jill Bellamy is on our board, along you're on our board of advisors. That it is, and she'll be on next week from the Netherlands, by the way. She really feels strongly that the European Parliament was the target of this cell, and we still have people at large. We still have terrorists at large. Did that cross your mind as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the subway that was targeted was also a very high-trafficked American area. Where many Americans are known to be State Department employees and others. So, and remember, one of the main issues here is the fact that ISIS is actually suffering in Syria. They are not because of French attacks and others. That's one of the reasons they're amping up their attacks in the EU because that is weakening them. But I will tell you, one of the most threatening things to civilization is a terrorist organization that's on the verge of collapse, because they will do everything possible to not collapse and to make us pay a higher price. So this is why when you decide to take on ISIS or any militant group like this, you have to do it quickly and resoundingly, or else you will continue to see them act out whenever and however possible, especially since the borders are being locked down.
We're going to go to a break, Dr. Jasser. When we come right back, Richard Cutting is going to have a question for you. So we'll be back in 3. Don't go away. Don't leave us. You've got to hear this information to help protect your families from terrorist attack. Dr. Jasser, stay with us. Richard Cutting will be right back. Thank you. This is Lisa Benson, and this is KKNT 960 The Patriot on Easter Sunday. Thank you.
You're listening to The Lisa Benson Show for National Security Matters. To join in the conversation, call anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Outside of the Valley, call toll-free 888-960-9696. Questions are also welcome by leaving a comment on www.lisabensonradio.com.
Welcome back, everyone. I have to laugh at that last commercial that I recorded. I start off talking really fast, and then I end up really soft. So, Gil, remind me to change that commercial. It sounds funny. Gil's my engineer. We thank him. And happy Easter to you, Gil. All right, we're back on the air, and we're back with my colleague, my friend, and board member, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and a leader in the Muslim Reform Movement. And Zuhdi, I just want to say I did get something that the European Union, is totally overwhelmed. And at this time, they can't be counted on. And I'm going to hand off the next question to Richard Cutting, my co-host.
Hi, Zuhdi. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We've watched Europe become inundated and Islamicized, if you will, because of political correctness, the political correctness that you referred to earlier, and the shielding communities you referred to. If they're in a more advanced state, and assuming that this is also happening in the United States, but we are not as far along, could Europe be sort of like a fast-forward time machine where we could look at Europe now and see things that we could do now here to prevent us becoming Europe in a few years? What are your recommendations there?
Well, that's a great question. And I think, America has not gone where Europe has yet as deeply or acutely, because we have one thing that inoculates us, that has been inoculating us a little bit, but not completely, that we sort of have not gotten there despite the political correctness and our homeland security failures and other things. And that thing is religious liberty and what is Americanism, if you will. So the reason there aren't as many enclaves, the reason my family and others feel American from the moment they get here, is being American is an ideology. It's not something that you have to assimilate. It's something that those who are here for political freedom feel right away. I know one of the greatest reformers that I've read, Bassam Tibi, who grew up in Germany, retired in America. And he said, he retired in America because even though he grew up in Germany, he never felt truly German. And it's because being German wasn't really an ideology that was pushed through media and education. It was really more just sort of a racial history. So as a result, that is something we need to operationalize in an ideological war. Operationalize what it means to be free, liberal, against theocracy, classical liberalism, what it means to be American. We're not engaging Muslim communities in that. We sort of let them be theocrats. So in America, while there aren't physical enclaves, there still are significant mental enclaves. They're not watching our media. They're not engaging in our significantly in our educational system. They have often private schools, et cetera. So this is happening here. It's just not as steep, and Americanism, if you will, has been protecting us, but it won't do it for long unless we operationalize it against this multiculturalism.
Well, Thank you. I got to take a deep breath. And one last question for you. Again, I'm really struck by the brothers in terrorism. Three pairs of brothers were actually in the 9/11 attack, and that's not talked about. We're just starting to talk about it now. And we look at Charlie Hebdo, the Karachi brothers, Sharif and Saeed. We look at Brussels. We look at the Paris attacks in November. Abu Dassam, I can't pronounce the last name, Brahim and Salah, who is alive and not really talking, I hear right now. Do you make, you can make sense of this, I think, as a Muslim, Muslim cultural identity, which are the liberty-loving people, Muslims around the world, and these enclaves, as you talk about, of Salafist, or whether it be Wahhabi or Deobandi. It runs in families, obviously. Brothers bond with the band of brothers, correct?
Yeah, I have a chapter in my book on tribalism, and as you all know, and you've covered this with Raheel and so many, we've along hand in hand in working on counterterrorism and counter-Islamism is women's rights, and the whole concept of honor abuse, honor killing. The whole honor concept runs at the core of the fuel, the nuclear energy of radical and political Islam. So this is why they target me and reformers. We dishonor Islam by not letting the Wahhabi leaders represent Islam. We dishonor Islam by rejecting the leaders of our mosques and CARE and others. So that honor, there is nothing more powerful than the honor within a family. So the Muslim, at the risk of saying the obvious, the Muslim Brotherhood calls itself a brotherhood because they tap into this loyalty to the family over loyalty to your country. So until we get Muslims and that's why I wrote about in my book, sometimes, us reformers, you'll see us pushing back against our parents, pushing back publicly against our own families,
Yes.
Saying our priorities to our country. So, this is the way to fight this war and it's not a coincidence that brothers are acting together, but yet you will find examples where one brother went to the military and was pro-American or pro-French, and the others became radicalized. And in those stories also is a narrative of what happened different to make one become an ally versus the other one being an enemy.
Which brings me to my last point. You, Zudi, Azra Nomani, who's been on this show, Raheel, all of you provide us with such insight and information. And the president came out over the weekend in an audio and said, don't let Brussels interfere or stand in the way of bringing refugees to America. And most everybody, even John McCain and others have said, pause it till we know what's going on. And the President of the United States has not called you to come to the White House. Any of you, is that correct?
He has not. None of our reformers. And, I will tell you, the dishonesty of President Obama was on full display in his interview with Jeffrey Goldberg 3 or 4 weeks ago in The Atlantic. Jeff wrote about it at length. And in there, he talked about how President Obama said clearly Islam has to come to terms with modernity. He mentioned President Obama talked about how there are conflicts within the faith that are really restricting their ability to do counterterrorism. I'm like, excuse me, where is that in the rest of your partisan, exploitation of these minority issues in order to make points in campaigns and divide our country rather than actually helping us lift up reformists and have a strategy? So it's not about strategy. It's about using this issue for partisan politics. And yet when he is relaxed and sitting with a reporter at length, he apparently knows what's going on. So it's purely dishonest. And it's sad that they aren't engaging us in the strategic long-term solutions.
What can I say except that I am so privileged to have you, friend, colleague, and here for us when we need you to explain to us what is going on. We now have 30,000 podcast listeners, Zuhdi, and we were heard last week in 5 or 6 countries. So let's hope that we can stay on the air and get this information out because it's so important. I want to thank you for joining me today and just stay safe, Zuhdi, and I'll be talking to you soon. All right?
Will do.
Okay.
Anytime.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go to a break, and when we come back, we're coming back with Nidra Paula, Richard Cutting, and we'll be talking live from Paris with Nidra. We'll be right back. This is Lisa Benson, and this is KKNT 960 The Patriot.